As for our speaker, Tenku Ruff trained as a novice in Zen monasteries in Japan and North America under Tessai Yamamoto Roshi, Abbot of the Kannonji Temple in Morioka, Japan, and received Dharma transmission in the same lineage. Tenku holds a Master of Divinity degree from Maitripa College, and she is a Board Certified Chaplain. Tenku has strong interest in ethics, inter-Buddhist and interfaith dialogue, and ways that people can support each other and grow through the challenges in life. Thank you so much for being willing to speak with us tonight, and we are so excited. Oh, and hold all your questions till the end. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. So yeah, my name is Reverend Tenku Ruff, and my tradition is Buddhism, but it's a particular branch of Buddhism, which is Zen. Zen is a type of Buddhism that, for whatever reasons, is particularly well known here in North America. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it within the context of Buddhism in general. And then I want y'all to know that in addition to being a Zen Buddhist priest, I'm also a board certified chaplain, and I'm also from the South. So I'm very accustomed to talking to people from different faith traditions, and I'm comfortable with that. So I often tell people that I have an open question policy. That doesn't mean that it can be a rude or inappropriate question, but if it is, I'll just tell you. So feel free, don't feel like any of your questions are stupid or, you don't know what to ask. You can ask whatever. So what I've done tonight is prepare a presentation with a sort of an overview of Zen, an overview of Buddhism. So I guess I should start there, an overview of Buddhism, just very light, and then an overview of Zen, and then a lot about the priest training path. And the reason I did it that way is a lot of people, what they most want to know about Buddhism is, what do y'all do? So that's like, I hope I can answer some of that, and then I'll stay open for questions. So on that note, let me jump in. So like I said, my tradition is Zen Buddhism. And I found my way to Zen Buddhism when I went to Japan after my time as an undergraduate, not so far from you in North Carolina. I never planned to be a Buddhist. I didn't grow up thinking I'd be a Buddhist. But the way that I found a connection with the tradition, it was through silent meditation. And that's what Zen is really known for, is silent meditation. There are a lot of other types of Buddhist practices, just as there are with any faith tradition. There are a lot of different ways of expressing that. Some Buddhists are known for their academic study. Some Buddhists are known for chanting practice. Others are known for service and trying to do good in the world. And we all make this one blend that is a religion. So let me just move toward the presentation that I made. And the one thing we all tend to have in common is what's known as the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are common to all Buddhists. It's sort of our the glue, or maybe the center that holds us together. So what are they? The Four Noble Truths were, let me stop this for just a second. Let me just back out just a little bit. The Four Noble Truths came to us through a person called the Buddha. So that would be an essential question to ask before we, go into what he taught, is who was he? So the Buddha was a guy who lived in northern India 2,600 years ago. And he was a person just like we are, who was living his life. His particular life happened to be well cared for because his dad was really invested in him becoming like a great leader. So the Buddha's living at home. He's got everything he needs. And he has this sort of a feeling like, something just doesn't feel right. And he doesn't quite know what that is. So he starts to, when you have that sort of a feeling, it starts to kind of like poke at you a little bit. Like, like I have what I need and the food is good and I have enough to eat. So it's not that. And I have shelter and my family's pretty okay. So why is it that I don't feel quite right? Something's not satisfying to me. I don't feel satisfied. Something's bugging me. And it's sort of like a little bit of an itch that just keeps going. This feeling of disquiet that we have. And so the Buddha started, he wasn't yet the Buddha. He was just a person whose name was Siddhartha. He started to explore that a little bit. And pretty soon he decided to leave where he grew up. So how did he get out? He jumped the wall because he lived in a walled compound. So he snuck out. And he was like, I'm going to see what's outside of here. I'm going to look outside the wall. So he went out there and he came across first a person with these really kind of lines on their face, and their skin looked really kind of saggy, and their hair was white. And he was like, I've never seen this before. He'd been such a protected person that he was really surprised. And so he asked his attendant, who had jumped the wall following him, like, what's going on? What's up with that person? And they're like, nothing. They're just old. And so he was like, okay, old. What does old mean? And so he thought about that a lot. So he goes back, climbs back over the wall, goes back home, continues to live his really safe and comfortable lifestyle. And that feeling comes up again, that like, something's not quite right. And so he jumps the wall again. And this time he goes out there and he sees a person and they're lying down on the road and they don't look so good. And they're coughing and making noise. And he's like, what's going on with this person? Why are they here? And again, the attendant helps out. He says, well, they're sick. And so he was like, I've never heard of that before. Sick. What is sick? So he starts to understand, oh, wow, people get old, they get sick. So he thinks about that a little bit more. The next time he goes out, he sees somebody lying down on the road and they're not moving. And he's like, what's going on? Why aren't they moving? They don't respond. And this time the attendant tells him, I'm sorry, but this person has died. And he's like, what is that? What does that mean? What is death? So that really shakes him up. And he starts to understand, wait a minute, these people got sick, they got old, they die. Am I going to get sick? Am I going to get old? Am I going to die? And that really shakes him up. So the final time he jumps the wall and goes out, he sees a holy person. And what he notices about this person is they have a sense of peace. So when he asks, and he learns that that's a holy person, he's like, well, how did that person have a sense of peace given that we all get old, we all get sick, we all die? In the middle of that, how do you feel peaceful? And so that started to really, really make him question so much that finally one day he goes and he jumps the wall for good. And he leaves the kingdom or the fortress where he grew up. He leaves his family and he goes out and he seeks the spiritual path. So this is his journey and this is how it started. It started with this this feeling that something's not quite right, but he didn't quite know what it was. So he goes out and he leaves behind all of his wealth. He leaves behind the security of his home and his family, and he goes out on his own. And this was a time, so like I said, it's about 2,600 years ago. This was a time in northern India where people were traveling and they were really exploring the spiritual path. So there were a lot of other people on the path. And fortunately, he finds his way to a teacher, which is great. He finds his teacher and they practice together and he gets it. And the teacher's like, Siddhartha, you got this. Why don't you stay here and help me teach? And he's like, no, something just, it's still bugging me. I don't quite know what it is. So then he goes on and he keeps, looking around and exploring the path, and he finds his way to the next spiritual teacher. And the same thing happens with him. He stays, he understands, he's invited to stay, and he's like, nope, I've got to keep going until I really understand. So he does. He leaves and he goes on. And finally, he goes through some time where he's, hangs out with these ascetics who are sort of trying to get beyond the physical body, and that didn't work out either. And he sits finally by himself under a tree, and he makes a vow, I'm not going to get up from this tree until I fully wake up. And he does. He sits there and he sits there. And, again, he's had all of this practice until this time. He's been really working on this. And he sits there and he sits in the meditation posture. And then finally, one morning, as the Eastern Star arises and he sees it, he has an understanding. And this is what he understood. He understood that everything that arises falls away. I bet y'all knew this already, right? But how much did you really know it? Everything that arises falls away. Everything that arises falls away. We live, we get old, sometimes we get sick, and then we die. This is the way that life is. So in the middle of that, how are we going to live our life? So then that brings us to the first thing he taught us, which is the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths are, first thing, suffering exists. I don't think anybody here can argue with that. At least if you do, then maybe you're in a different world than I'm in. Suffering happens. We suffer. It's not like suffering's good, suffering's bad. Suffering just is. And we've all experienced it. And if you haven't experienced it yet, you will. Suffering is. It's simply here. The second noble truth is the reason that we suffer because we try to hold on. We grab. We want things to stay the same, or we want things to be fixed. No, even though everything that arises falls away, we grab. However, the cessation of suffering is possible. How? We stop grabbing. And the Buddha outlined a path for the cessation of suffering, which is called the Eightfold Noble Path. And the Eightfold Noble Path is basically how are we going to live our life? Living our life in a way that causes benefit and doesn't cause harm. Practicing right speech, practicing right livelihood, practicing meditation, treating others well. The whole path is how we learn to let go of our suffering and be in this world where suffering simply is. So that's the Four Noble Truths. So like I said, that's the central teaching for all of Buddhism, and the fact that everything changes. And this is the core. So I said, remember the Buddha was in India. So, over the course of 2,600 years, it spread a little bit, and this is how it came to North America. So I have this little map that I want to share with you. Oops, I have a little delay. So here is about where the Buddha was, right here in the middle. So Buddhism went all through India, down to Sri Lanka, and then over to the rest of Southeast Asia. Much later, it went up to Tibet. Some people, I don't know if you see the cursor, but some went all the way around through the water for 3 years and landed in China. And then up at the top, you'll see, it went up over to Korea and over to Japan. And Japan is where I encountered Buddhism. And that is where the Zen tradition that I practice comes from. So Zen originated in China and then made its way over to Japan. And then finally to America. Okay. I have this slide in here because I wanted you to see all the different types of Buddhas that there are. And I use this slide sometimes when I'm doing this presentation for the hospital, because it's also like a color-coded, clue, a little map for you. If you want to know what type of a Buddhist you're dealing with, then you can tell by their clothes. So I sometimes teach this in the hospital. So you can see that there's some sort of similar colors going on here, and this is me right in the middle. But there's variations. We have Koreans over here. We have Tibetans. These are Thai, or this one looks like maybe from Cambodia. These are from Myanmar. She's from China and practicing in Taiwan. So they're all different kinds of Buddhists. In fact, I've seen it said that there are more different types of Buddhists than there are in the Christian tradition. So a whole bunch of different types of Buddhism. So if you just think of all the different types of Christianity that there are just here in North America, then think that's how much variety you can find. But at that core are those Four Noble Truths. Okay, where are we? So remember I said somebody took a boat all the way from India and went off for 3 years and then landed in China. That's the first ancestor of Zen, the ancestor Bodhidharma. He was born in India and made his way over to China, where legend has it he sat in a cave for 6 years and was enlightened and began the spread of the Zen tradition throughout China. I actually went to Bodhidharma's cave in China. It's tended by nuns, and it's quite an amazing place. And you might recognize the name of the temple at the right below where the cave is. Like there's a temple, and then the cave's up above the temple, and that's called Shaolin Monastery. So Shaolin Monastery is known now for martial arts, and it's also known to me as being the home of the ancestor Bodhidharma. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit to the next ancestor. So you see we skipped a lot of years here. So I'm giving you a very high-level view. This is the first ancestor in Japan. His name was Eihei Dogen, and he was born in Japan and lost his mom when he was just a little kid. When he was at his mom's funeral, he noticed the smoke going up from the incense being burned at her funeral. And he realized that everything that arises passes away. The incense becomes ash and becomes smoke, and it doesn't become incense again or wood again. So it passes. And this created this really strong question for him of, what are we doing? So you might hear, that's like a paraphrase, but you might hear some similarity in his question. And his question took him back to China and then met his teacher in China and then went back to Japan. And he's the founder of Soto Zen in the way that I know it and the way that I learned to practice it, with a heavy focus on meditation and work and really being present, living in the present moment. So those are some of the things we do. I promised you I'd tell you about sort of our daily life. And these are the core components. We wake up in the morning, we do zazen practice, and that's meditation practice. We do a lot of cleaning and work practice, like I mentioned. We do chanting practice, where we chant the Buddhist sutras, and we eat our meals in a formal way, in silence. So all of this is a way of cultivating mindfulness of everything we do, really being present in each moment and really showing up in each moment, just for that, in that moment. So this is sort of our work day or just our day, I guess, in the monastery. We spend every morning in silent meditation, and then each month we do a 7-day silent retreat. Retreat's kind of a weird English word. It's more like a 7-day silent intensive meditation focus, where we usually start at around, we start our day around 3 and end at about 10 p.m. And the whole day we're in silence and we're doing seated meditation with some chanting and, of course, food and some work practice mixed in. So these are all people that I know, and so again, reserve your questions and I'd be happy to answer them at the end. This is an instruction of how to sit zazen. So I thought we would take a moment here and just try it rather than me showing you a slide. So I'm going to stop the share for just a minute. We're just going to try it for a couple of minutes, because zazen's a real body practice and you can get a sense of it from your body. You do not have to be a Buddhist to try zazen. You can apply whatever faith tradition you happen to be from, including none at all. So if you are from a Christian faith tradition, just hold love of Christ in your heart as we practice, but all we're doing is sitting in silence. So start off, probably you're going to be, most of y'all are in chairs. So put your 2 feet on the floor, just like this. And if you're sitting on the floor, then put your 2 knees in balance. And then you want those to be in balance with your seat to make kind of a triangle. So feeling your feet on the floor and your seat connecting with your chair or your cushion under you. Let yourself be in balance and feel the ground underneath you. And feel yourself really connected with the earth, with the ground. And then from that stable place, let your spine grow upwards. So start at the base of your spine and feel it lengthen as you move on up through the crown of your head. You can feel the crown of your head connecting with the sky above. And as you feel that lengthening going up, notice how it creates a sense of spaciousness. Our eyes are soft, not like looking out, but also not closed, just softly focused. And then let go of any tension you might have in your body right now. Let go behind your eyes. Let go in your jaw and in your neck. Let your shoulders relax. And then let your breath drop down into your lower belly. So just try it for a couple of minutes. I won't keep us very long. As your breath settles into your lower belly, breathe from there. And as you breathe from your lower belly, see if you can let go of your thoughts and really just be in this present moment. When thoughts come up, notice, let it go, return to your breath. So I'm going to time you, and we're going to try it for 1 minute. So see if you can do that. As thoughts come up, let them go and return to your breath. What did you think? Actually, it wasn't a full minute, but I didn't want to torture you if it's all new for you. I just thought I would give you a taste. So this is what we do in Zen. This is the core of our practice. And you can see that I wasn't teaching you some particular doctrine, but it's really about letting go of your thoughts, and so that you can let the truth very naturally arise. And this is how we spend a lot of our days. So let me return back to my PowerPoint. So again, rather than showing you on the slide, I thought I would show you in person. Okay. This is our schedule. People always ask me what our schedule is like in the monastery, so I thought I would show you. They're very slightly different schedules in different places, but like I said, we wake up very early, and then we spend about almost 2 hours in the type of meditation that I just showed you. Then we move into a chanting service where we chant the teachings of Buddhism out loud. And we use bells and different instruments to do timing and to signal each other. After that, we clean. We clean up the temple every morning. We sweep, we dust, we do all that stuff. And then we have breakfast. And usually after that, we have a little time for study, but sometimes we move straight into the workday. And that's sort of the rhythm of the day until the end of the day, where again, we eat, and then we have zazen again. Seated meditation is called zazen, and then we go to sleep. This is our day. During that day, people come to the temple to see us and spend time with us. We do different things. Our work changes. We're living together with other people. And there's a lot more variety than you might think. And at the same time, a lot more chance to be in a very tight container with a small group of people. So, sometimes you find that the things that seem sort of small when you're not living with the same people day in and day out can seem kind of big when you're in the same space all the time. So we have to learn to get along with each other as well. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to skip over this one. I wanted to talk about how Zen came to the United States. And I had to add in this slide, actually, because this is the part of Zen coming to the United States that often gets left off. And why does this get left off? Because this part of Zen coming to the United States does not involve white people. So we had to learn this history again, even though people knew it the whole time. So we celebrate this year the 100th anniversary of Soto Zen in North America, and that doesn't include Hawaii. It came earlier to Hawaii, but here in this part of North America. And we're going to have a big ceremony in November in Los Angeles, where the first Zen temple in North America is located. And this is a picture of it down here in the bottom left corner. And it's still there. It's called Zenchuji Temple. And this one on the right is the first Soto Zen temple in San Francisco. And these are some of the early people who came to bring Zen. And they brought it mostly for immigrant communities, people who came from Japan or other places in Asia who were wanting to practice in the same way they had at home. So originally that's who was practicing, but then something really significant happened during the time around World War II, and that is they closed a lot of the temples in order to send a lot of the Japanese Americans into a forced incarceration. So that some of the temples shut down, and that created a gap. It created like a lot of ripples, but the gap is both time and shuttered. So this temple right here, Zenchuji, the one in the bottom left corner, was shut down for 2 years before it started to reopen. So then I'm going to skip ahead though. I'm way ahead. So something happened in between this time and that time, which is, we had war. And during that war, of course, we had war with Japan. But then after the war with Japan, people went to Japan when it was occupied. And they were exposed to Buddhism then. And some of them became really interested when they came back. So first wave was in the 40s and 50s with what's called the Beat generation. We saw some translations. We saw some early works. We saw people in the counterculture movement interested, and they began practicing, mostly a lot of them on the West Coast. And then, we have the hippies. So this is a really big wave of interest in meditation practice, is the counterculture movement of the 60s and 70s, especially the late 60s. This is the time when the San Francisco Zen Center grew up, and it's still very active to this day. It's the largest temple in North America, the largest Soto Zen temple in North America. And it's also where I spent 2.5 years of my training. So during this time, we had a number of books come up that became really important for people. A really famous one is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And the first teacher of the San Francisco Zen Center, this is his teachings transcribed and edited into a book. And if you're interested in learning anything about Zen, this is a really good book to start off with. Okay, this is the way, I'm not going to leave you on this slide very long because there's too much busyness, but this is the priest path for Soto Zen priest, starting with birth and moving into our ordination. Then we're in the monastery, we become the head monk, we receive teaching permission, and then we keep going until we become a teacher. Maybe we get a temple, maybe we have some, leadership, and then we die. So all here in a nicely illustrated Japanese cartoon. So let me break that down for you. This is my own path. This is my teacher. I met my teacher in the not so long after college, when I was in Japan working as an English teacher in a high school. And I didn't ordain with him right away, but I went back about 6 years later for ordination. So this is my own ordination. These are the components of it. We shave our heads. It's a way of letting go of attachment and attachment to looking good, or attachment to being a certain way in the world. We receive a new name. For me, that's when I received the name Tenku. So all ordained receive a new name. And then we get our eating bowls as well. And these are what they look like. So in this top picture, they're all wrapped up nicely, and I'm receiving them, and this is them opened. So these are the components of becoming a monk. And this is my teacher up here. Okay. And then we go off to the monastery for training. People always want to know what my room looks like. So I show you a picture right here. This is my room. I shared it with at least one nun, sometimes two of us in this space. So you live very close together. And it's kind of on the edge of the monastery. So really you can see very close to nature. On the mountain behind, we have wild boars and monkeys. And this is my little bitty desk. And we keep our bedding in the closet. So very simple room. So this is what monks look like when we travel. You can tell it's, very old-timey gear. And then this is a picture of some of the people I practiced with. In this particular photo, they're gathered to tell me goodbye when I left. And then the next step we become a head student. And after we've been practicing for a while, we have to get tested. So people can ask us any Dharma question, any kind of a Buddhist question they want, and we have to be able to answer it. So that's a picture from that ceremony. You can see that this one is mixed with some foreign people, foreign meaning Western people, and some Japanese people. And so I did this ceremony at a place where a lot of Western people came. And so I decided to do it in both languages. And then the next step is we receive teaching permission. So all of these are skipping ahead. This is about a 5-year process. And this is my picture from the head monastery. You can see I'm dressed very spiffy in this one with, freshly cleaned head. And then some other things I thought I would bring up is different types of practice that we might do. This one was from pilgrimage practice, where I undertook a pilgrimage walking about 750 miles in the steps of the monk Kobodaishi. So this is the route around one of the islands of Japan. This is the elevation that we went. So you can see it goes up and down a lot. And you visit these 88 different temples along the way. It took me about 45 days. I wanted to throw that in there as another type of practice. I mentioned chanting practice, I mentioned seated practice, but I wanted to let you know that there's a lot of different ways to practice. This is another way that I have personally found very meaningful to practice, which is my work as a chaplain. And this one is after the tsunami in Japan which happened in 2011. And I went not long after that to care for the survivors from that period in time. And let me go and then I'm going to go back. And then the other way that I've practiced chaplaincy is in hospitals and hospices in North America. This is obviously, during the height of the COVID pandemic, and I'm in the intensive care unit here. And really, remember those signs I told you about at the beginning? Sickness, old age, and death. So all of those right there under one roof in a hospital. And it's a really beautiful and amazing place to practice, but very challenging as well. So that's what I appreciate about it. It's like a 3-for-1 bonus. You get sickness, old age, and death all under one roof together with the practice. So then I'll go back, I think. I don't know if these are... This is just another picture of my teacher, and now I have my own disciple as well, and this is him on this side. It's my teacher's temple in Japan. This is my own temple here in Beacon, New York. This is a group, one of the national organizations for North America, and I was the president of this organization for a few years. But I wanted to give you a sense of what Buddhism looks like here in the West. I bet you didn't know we had so many people practicing Zen Buddhism in North America. So this was our conference before the pandemic. So I guess this was 2018. And then I just thought I'd show you this picture. Sometimes we get the impression that Buddhists in North America are a bunch of white people, but this is New York. And look at all the different nationalities represented in New York. So this is a picture from the Buddhist Council of New York, one of our Zoom meetings. And we have people from all over the world. It's so amazing to be able to practice together, with shared purpose and shared intentions. And I think that's it. Thank you so much. I wanted to be sure to leave plenty of time for questions. Like I told you, I have an open question policy, so I hope you'll take advantage of that. I give you a really high level view of Buddhism. So if you want to dig in more, I can also recommend some ways to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. What a fascinating presentation. So now I want to open it up for the students that are on Zoom here. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question, feel free. But if you would like to also use the chat, type your question into the chat and then I can field them. So I'll give everybody just a few minutes.
I find it really fascinating how you got a new name, and how did that process really work? How did they come up with your name, or something like that?
Yeah. So there's some form to it in that you get Chinese characters and you get 4 characters, just like spelling. But other than that, my teacher chose my name for me. And that's the way that it happens, is your teacher chooses the name for you. So they may choose a name that feels like their dreams for you, or sometimes they choose names that are descriptive of you. So the name that my teacher chose for me, Tenku, it means something like the emptiness of vast space. So that's like obviously a really aspirational name, to have that much spaciousness. And he said he was influenced by, that I came to Japan on an airplane. And he said that the way that I approached practice had a lot of spaciousness. So we get our names in a lot of different ways, but like I said, there's some form to it and then some creativity as well. So thank you for asking.
Thank you.
So one came directly to me through the chat, so I'll ask it for the student. It's, how hard is it to stay silent for 7 days? How would one go to a Buddhist church if curious? And then just to let you know, there's a couple more in the chat that we can do after that.
Yeah, let me start backwards then. There are Buddhist churches in Charlotte. I don't know if you have really big ones there, but you have some. So and the ones that you have in Charlotte the most are, I think you have a lot of Vietnamese, or at least a few Vietnamese Buddhist churches, which they might not speak English as their first language, but they'll be fascinating because they're practicing it very close to the way they would have done in Japan, in Vietnam. And then you also have some different meditation groups there. So the way you find is just like you find anything else, get out your Google and look around, or ask me for recommendations. There's a couple of places in Asheville. There's some places in Chapel Hill. There are places all around you, up in Winston-Salem. So you just start looking. And then I always recommend to people to try out a number of different places. Maybe you go to one and it doesn't feel right, or it seems great, but don't stop there. Like when you're first exploring, go into a few different types of places and really check your gut, see how you feel in your body and check your intuition. What is this like, And then you asked about staying in silence for 7 days. For some people, it's really challenging, and for some people, it's really easy. And neither one is good nor bad. So for me, I tend to be a more of a quiet person. So 7 days of silence is like a luxury vacation for me. But there are other aspects of the practice that for me are hard, and like all the people and all the socializing and having to live very close together. So you just do it, whether it's hard or easy, it's just part of it. So you just do it.
If the Buddhist church does not speak English when you go, how are you supposed to show your curiosity or just like interest in what day of the week is the best day to go, or is it any day of the week? Whereas if you go to Christian, it's Sundays or Wednesday.
Right.
How would you know when to go for Buddhism?
A lot of the Western Buddhist practitioners will have services on Sundays because that's our rhythms here in North America, right? So that's pretty easy to find. You just look on their website and see when they do their talks. And then in terms of speaking English, most people are going to speak some English. It might not be their first language, but somebody there will speak English, or they'll have something written down for you in English. And then you can look around and see if you can be curious in ways not only limited to language explanation, like what kind of things can you look at and find, like you're going to find bells like this. Maybe you're going to find a statue like you see behind me, and develop just a sense of curiosity and wonder. That's what I would recommend. Okay, I see a lot of things in the chat. I should take a couple before.
Yes, if you're good about Shannon's question about the plates and bowls, and then Kelsey's question about ordination, and then I have one more that was sent a direct message, but I'll let you get those two first.
Okay, plates and bowls. Yeah, we can use other plates and bowls sometimes, like if I go somewhere, if I go to a restaurant or in a home, we use other plates and bowls. But during the time of formal meals, that's all we use. And we put all of our food into those bowls. And not only that, every bit of food that we put into our bowls, we must eat. So you really have to learn the idea of just enough. Like, do I have enough food, or do I have too much food? Because you can't throw any of it away. And then when we're done eating, we take some warm water and you clean the bowl with the warm water. You clean all the bowls with the warm water and then you drink it. There's no waste at all. And then we take a rag, we dry it, we stack them up, and we're done. We don't even have to do dishes, except for the pots that you cooked with. It's very efficient and ecological. And then what was the other one? Ordination process. Wow, ordination is a really big commitment. It's a life commitment, and everybody has a different reaction to it. Some people cry. Some people are like laugh and they're really happy. For me, I had been practicing as a lay person for a long time before I ordained. So I just felt really ready and really grateful. That was the biggest emotion for me, was just gratitude. And yeah, it definitely has a mental impact on you. It's a lifetime commitment to live our life for the benefit of all beings. And so it's a heavy, heavy vows that you take on. And also quite wonderful, I have to say, but not to be undertaken lightly either.
And the question that came to me directly has something to do with this too. It's, how did your family react to your decision to, I think, becoming Buddhist, but also ordination? And then this person asked, how did it make you feel during the process? But you sort of answered that. So
yeah, my family were mixed. Some wanted to come, and some were really unsure about the whole thing. And my parents, the way that I grew up was in a Christian family. So what my parents decided was that they really supported me personally, but that they didn't support the religion. So our relationship was really loving and warm, and they were very supportive, but they had a little bit of trouble with the actual, not a little bit, they had trouble with the actual ceremony. And they also had some curiosity and would ask me questions over time, and told me that they didn't understand the religion itself, but they understood what they saw in front of their eyes, which was the effect that it had on me and the way that I was in the world. And they said they could clearly see that it's had a beneficial effect on me, and that that's where they really wanted to connect with me.
And there's another question from the chat. How do you survive on so little sleep? And how do you not fall asleep during those early morning meditations?
Those are really great questions, very pragmatic. A lot of people do fall asleep. Like I said, for me, the silence was a good fit. I just have not been a person who falls asleep much during Zazen time, but that's random, because some of the most dedicated monks, in the whole monastery fall asleep. You don't get to pick. So we learn to stay present through it, through the sleepiness, to still be present when we're feeling sleepy. And as you might have noticed, some of you, sometimes we get grumpy when we're sleepy. Sometimes we get irritable, and we learn to be present through that. And surviving on so little sleep is, what you learn to do is to find rest internally. And when your mind stops being so active all the time, thinking, worrying, stressing out, then you find rest inside. And I found that the longer I practiced, the less sleep I needed. So I didn't feel tired. And I'll say though that when I left the monastery and returned into regular society, that I found I needed more sleep again. Especially when I was working in the hospital throughout the COVID pandemic, I was really tired a lot of the time, just all of that, chaos all around. So you adjust, I guess, is the easiest way. You just do it and you adjust. Yeah.
There's one last one from the chat too about, is there any connection between Buddhist teaching and, I think this is Taoism or Taoist teachings?
Yeah, there's a heavy influence in the types of Buddhism that went through Northern Asia, because they went through China, So a thing, maybe, I don't know if we could say this about all religions, probably, but certainly with Buddhism, Buddhism adapts in every culture that it's in. So there's not really like a need to get rid of something, but more it blends with the culture that's there. So when Buddhism went through China, it really blended with Taoism. Just the same, and when it went through Tibet, it really blended with the religion that was there, and the same in Japan, where it really blended with Shinto religion. So there are very strong Taoist elements in the type of Buddhism that I practice, which is the northern, with the type of Buddhism that went across the north of Asia. The kind that went through across the south of Asia, you won't see as much of that influence there.
Are there any final questions? You had a lot of questions this time, which I think illustrates the interest of the students listening. So,
what about
marriage
and family and life? Like if you're a Buddhist,
yeah,
how do Buddhists get married traditionally? Or what if you have children, or like the family aspect of things where you're not in a monastery, you're trying to teach?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. The Japanese traditions of Buddhism, monks and nuns can marry. Usually we do so after we leave the monastery. While we're in the monastery, and usually that's around 5 years, we're celibate, And some people stay in the monastery their whole life. But when we leave the monastery and go to our own temple, then we can be married. That's unusual in Buddhism. You won't see that. You remember that picture I showed you of all the different types of Buddhists? You won't see that in all of them. Most traditions are celibate. But I myself am married, and but I don't have kids. So then you asked about kids. I think that's a hard one for women and easier for men. So we are allowed to have children, but then there's just the logistics of it. Like how are we going to go to the monastery if we're pregnant? You really can't. So that part I think we're figuring out in North America, where especially here in North America, you'll see a lot more women who are ordained and married and have kids, but it's a kind of a new thing. Usually in Japan, most of the nuns I know are not married. And there's not like a prohibition against it, but the nuns' order stayed celibate when the monks' orders started to integrate being married. So it's sort of a new development. It's only been, for men, it's been the last couple of 100 years. And for women, it's still pretty unusual.
Can I ask you to clarify about that? Just
Yes.
so in Zen Buddhism, you said you can get married, or you can be married, but it's after you leave the monastery. Can you clarify on that when you, yeah.
Yeah. Or when you go to the monastery, you have to go by yourself.
Okay, so you could be married before and then go to the monastery but you would be alone.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's also that happens. All of it's a bit artificial because Buddhists are traditionally celibate. So it's like figuring it out.
That's why I was asking. I'm interested in, that's.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
So a couple more, how do you find rest internally? Is there a method? Yeah. And then how do you drown out distractions like hunger during meditation? I think those two questions are actually connected.
They are. So remember how we did that 30 seconds or so of sitting practice? So the more we do that practice, and for us, like you saw, it's a couple of hours in the morning, a couple in the evening, and then longer in those 1 week a month. Your mind starts to quiet. When your mind starts to quiet, then the things that usually bug us also start to quiet. That argument we had with our sister that went so badly, you replay that over and over and over in your mind till it finally starts to settle a little bit. And then when we sync with our breath and really let our thoughts settle, then there's just a lot more ease in the way that we can be in the world. Because remember when I started off by saying how everything that arises falls away? When you're practicing, you learn to accept that. And so related to the hunger, it's not really about getting rid of the hunger or fixing it, but we know our food is going to come, and just being like, oh, hunger, here it is. And the same for distractions that arise. Oh, look at that. My mind is going over that story of that fight with my sister again. And then you return to your breath. So over time, you develop a capacity to both to concentrate, and it's not really about some state of perfection, like getting rid of your thoughts, as more as cultivating the ability to be with the rising and falling of the universe and accepting it like it is. Some days it rains, some days it doesn't. And hating the rain and loving the sun isn't going to change the weather. So it's the same with us. Some days are just hard and we're sad. And when we learn to accept that, all right, today I'm feeling sad. I think I'm going to stay home and have a cup of tea. And some days we're not. But one thing we can be confident of is it will change. And the more we accept that, the more we develop that capacity, the more internal quiet we can develop. It's like more of like a spaciousness, to accept everything rather than wanting things to be exactly the way that I think it should be. I don't know if does that answer your question?
I think that's actually a really lovely note to end on, especially thinking about the meaning of your name, as you shared earlier.
Thank you.
And so we're just so grateful that you shared all of this with us tonight. And so if everyone will sort of, from your dorm rooms or your car, wherever you're tuning in, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us at Wingate. I'm going to pass it back to the Lyceum coordinator, who's going to conclude with some thoughts, I think, and a form, perhaps.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
And Reverend Tenku, we want to thank you also for your presentation. I think also we see a lot of meditation in a general sense nowadays. And I think people are paying attention to like that inner self and wanting to feel full. I appreciate this presentation, actually. It spoke to me in a number of ways. I'm not going to get into it because it's now 8. So I understand people may be hungry or tired. So we'll let it be. But I really do appreciate your insight and inviting us into your world and helping us to understand. So thank you so much. And I look forward to having you again. And Ms. Amaya, if you would, at this time, you can drop the form link in the chat box. Again, guys, we're going to stay on for about 5 to 10 more minutes to give you time to fill out the form so that you can receive credit. Do not abuse that time, because after that duration, we will close the Zoom and you will not be able to receive credit. Again, we thank you guys for being respectful and being honoring and listening to our presentation today. And again, everyone have a great evening and take time to yourself to kind of mentally cleanse, because it's a high demand in this semester. And again, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So good to see you again.
Alrighty, so the Zoom form is also is now in the chat box. So if you just fill that out, that's how you will receive Lyceum credit for this evening's meeting. And I'll just stay for 10 minutes just in case anybody has any questions on or any problems with the link.